Good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's X Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Facilitating Investment Decisions for Small to Mid-sized Pharmaceutical and Biotechnology Companies. My name is Sonia Hunt, and it's my pleasure to be your X Talks moderator for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes. This presentation includes a Q&A session with our speaker. This webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speaker throughout this presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. Now, this chat box is located in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require any assistance, please contact me at any time by sending a message using this chat panel. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Please note that this event will be recorded and made available for streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank Worldwide Clinical Trials who developed the content for this presentation. Worldwide Clinical Trials is a leading global contract research organization that works in partnership with biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies to create customized solutions that advance new medications from discovery to reality. Their full-service clinical development capabilities include bioanalytical laboratory services and phases 1 through 4 clinical trials, as well as post-approval and real-world evidence studies, all powered by their talented and accessible team of clinicians, scientists, and researchers who bring their first-hand expertise to each clinical program. The team of 3,000 plus professionals spans 60 plus countries and believes that through collaboration and a culture that embraces diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, everyone plays an important role in making a world of difference for patients and their caregivers. They are united in cause with their customers to improve the lives of patients through new innovative therapies. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to your speaker for today's webinar, and he is Dr. Michael Murphy, Chief Medical and Scientific Officer with Worldwide Clinical Trials. Dr. Murphy is the Chief Medical and Scientific Officer and an original founder of Worldwide Clinical Trials. He is a founder and research and development editor for American Health and Drug Benefits, and for over 2 decades, he has been a lecturer within the Harvard-MIT Division of Health Services, or Sciences rather, Technology on Clinical Trial Methodology for board-certified, board-eligible research fellows. He is the recipient of the Clinical Research and Excellence Lifetime Achievement Award. Pharma Voice has selected him as one of the 100 most inspiring people in the life sciences industry. And now it's my pleasure to pass the mic and the controls over to Michael. So Michael, when you're ready, you may begin. And there he is. Hi, Michael.
Hi, good morning, Sonia. Good morning, everyone. Such good friends. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It is indeed a time of excitement. I've been doing this for 35 years. I've never seen such incredible technology, such opportunities, such highly nuanced clinical targets addressing unmet needs. The collaborative R&D efforts are astounding, and yet, there is traction, particularly in small biopharmaceutical and pharmaceutical companies. The ability to get traction on the investment side, as we all know, is quite difficult. So this presentation is about that. How can a clinical research organization facilitate investment decisions, given the complex dynamics that take place in that decision? So the genesis of this, and Sonia, if you could please pass the control one more time. The genesis of this is actually related to the ability and our ability to work with small to mid-sized organizations. In the last 3 to 4 years, about 97% of our client base is a small pharmaceutical biotechnology company. As small as one person, we have a few that are 20,000, but commonly 10 to 20 scientific and operational staff, which means by definition, in order to gain traction in development, an extended project team, an extended team with strategic collaborators is necessary. All of the companies I'm talking about have very innovative technology, highly nuanced indications. Commonly, there is a single lead asset. There's a pipeline, but it's an aspirational one. because there's simply not enough funding to advance all the different technology that these organizations might have. Now, when we come in on some of these programs, what I always notice, and I'm sure you will agree, there is considerable scientific and professional investment that has taken place. On our side, it creates a sense of commitment and follow through. It's not a transactional service. It's a strategic one. It's one that you've placed your professional career in, your treasure in, and that is commensurate upon us to actually deliver all that we can to make your organization a success. Our key decision makers commonly are CEOs, CMSOs, VP of clinical operations. I like to say there's lots of dating before any proposal for marriage, lots of discussion. We have very long relationships with many of these clients in excess of 2 years. In many cases, I have one that I've worked with for 11 years. The ubiquitous comments are always around burn rates, runways, and fundraising. So how can we facilitate that type of approach? Now, you've seen these questions. This is the problem that I think most of our client base encounters. When you reach out for funding, you get a lot of different comments. Call me when you have a lead. Now, that could mean a lead investor or a lead compound, or even worse, call me when you have clinical data, which in essence is a catch-22. If I had the clinical data, you would invest, but I cannot get the clinical data because you won't invest. Or I need an annuity, not a science project. Money for the right story. I need you to execute to a very clear plan because I intend to have a tranche around milestones, as I like to say it. And importantly, for a small company, what is tractable for a small company? Many of our colleagues have very aspirational goals, but we find that in the investment community, they usually focus on what can actually be done, not what might be done. Kind of a here and now, what can you do? There's a theme that we commonly encounter, which is called shots on goal versus a bespoke targeted indication. So, diverse audience, lots of different sentiments out there, but all in all, one that's quite exciting and gives us incredible opportunities to work together collaboratively. Now, depending on who you speak to, you'll get a lot of different points of emphasis. There are many, many sources of funding, very diverse points of emphasis: angels, private equity, venture capital, capital markets, government funding. I've put two here that we most frequently encounter. And I want to illustrate how a CRO's contribution, a clinical CRO, can be helpful in this regard. So on the venture side, what we find, and perhaps you'll agree, is those folks are looking for value inflection points. They impose very key operational metrics right at the outset. As one nice gentleman once said to me, Dr. Murphy, I'm not going to pretend to understand the science and I don't understand the medicine, but I can hold you accountable for the timelines and expenditures you just gave me. That I can do. So operational metrics, value inflection points, a real focus on the management and the business model of the organization in question. I think in some respects, it's as important as the compound itself, how the company is managed. And that extends into how are decisions made for strategic outsourcing. In my experience, they're not always convinced about the notion of personalized medicine, but novelty is a feature, particularly if you're in late stage development. And invariably, in early stage fundraising activities, the key opinion leaders really influence evaluations. So working with individuals that know the KOLs, that can facilitate the interactions with the KOLs, and can position your asset in the most favorable light is absolutely key. When we switch over to pharma partnering, many of our colleagues have that as an intention. They want to develop the asset to an inflection point, and then they want to partner or sell it to a larger company. Our experience is that these folks are looking for quantifiable benefits, and they're somewhat risk averse. They can be very low valuations early, but very big steps later. Long ago, in our experience, moved away from opportunistic type of opportunities to kind of portfolio fit. Does it fit in our portfolio? I've had the opportunity to engage in this exercise 6 or 7 times. I thought regulatory review was difficult, but the evaluations here are incredibly comprehensive and highly critical, down into the lab notes in the back room. So it does require an internal champion to facilitate that decision. And importantly, from our point of view, there seems to be a shift from purely a scientific and regulatory point of view to one that worries a bit about adoption and reimbursement opportunities. What's the exit? Under the assumption it is approved, can I in fact get it used? So if we look at these two extreme examples, you can see that the points of emphasis and the messaging that needs to occur can be extraordinarily different. So we want to ask everyone on the phone a couple of questions to calibrate where we are. So what has been the most recent source of funding within your organization? Sonia, do you want to talk over some of these good points?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much, Michael. So, audience members, for this poll question, it's done in real time, so your participation is strongly encouraged and very much appreciated. And all you have to do is click on one of the options below. So, once again, I will repeat what the options are, and the question is. What has been the most recent source of funding within your organization? Angel investing, an individual or group with high net worth, or venture capital, form of private equity for startups, or is it capital market, venues where any investor can purchase, or the option is government funding sponsored by the FDA, NIH, NIA, or DoD. And then final opportunity, if you like to choose, is a private equity investment. A partnership may buy, manage, and sell company. So please go ahead and make your selection now. I'll leave it open for another 10 seconds. And Michael, it looks like we have half of our audience, so I'm going to encourage the remainder to go ahead and make their selection now. Oh, that's great. Looks like everyone now is participating. I really appreciate that. Okay, perfect. So thank you everyone for participating in poll question number 1. I'm now going to close the polls and let's take a look at the results. Okay, so here are the results. In our audience, Michael, 8% chose angel investing, while 46% of our audience chose venture capital.
Okay.
15% goes all the way down to capital market, government funding, and then again 15% for private equity. So thank you, everyone. Truly appreciate your involvement. And now back to you, Michael.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We had anticipated that might be the breakdown, by the way, because
Oh,
that's been our experience over the years, Sonia. That's kind of where folks land in the small company space. Okay. Now, where can we contribute? I hope you can see this interesting slide I put together. So on the left side is a discovery algorithm. This was actually my discovery algorithm a few years ago. I thought clinical research was difficult. I did not realize how difficult discovery research was. Very technical, very layered, as intricate and involved as anything we might consider in clinical research. So how do we facilitate moving forward in that setting? One is we create what I call the Olympic rings, which are on the right side of this slide. Lots of different players, many different points of view, all colleagues, all interactive, each one learning from the other, and each one contributing to the overall development effort toward, EMA, FDA, MHRA, that type of key first step moving into the clinic. This is an example where all of us together are going to be better than any one of us alone, or the whole is going to be a lot greater than any of our parts. Now, I put a little green star in here to illustrate where a clinical contract research organization could have the maximal impact. Are we interested in your drug discovery, in your lead identification, target validation? Absolutely. Everyone that would be assisting you has a strong pedigree in discovery research. We're very interested. Can we be contributory that early in the program? Not so much. We are mostly listening and learning and not contributing. Where the star is the interface between the enabling non-clinical data and the first steps within the clinic. That is our experience where our particular organization might be more helpful to you, is this particular area here. The more this moves from left to right, the more contributory a contract research organization can be. And we've had terrifically good experience working in that particular space, getting ready for those very first key regulatory interactions, which, as we all know, are very technical, very granular, and require an excellent balanced approach toward non-clinical as well as clinical information. Now, when we try to do this, what we notice is there are a lot of different points of view. So everyone sees the goal the same, but they look at it through a very different prism. And that means a CRO is constantly integrating, adjudicating, coordinating, bringing these different points of view together. So the medical and scientific staff would say, oh, these are elegant designs, very innovative technology. We really want to have breakthrough therapeutics. It looks like you've got the idea. Our clinical operations might say, just a second. I need known metrics, staffing that is actually available. I need milestones and timelines which are consistent with your experience. What have you actually done? Can you give me the predictable milestones and timelines? That will significantly de-risk any investment decision. Or outsourcing, straightforward, detailed specifications with an explicit acknowledgement along the way of the sponsor's expectations. Very important. And then finally, the elephant in the room, I call it finance. Good payment schedules, mutually agreeable terms. We don't want you to fund our programs, but your operations team needs to understand and appreciate the financial impact of their operational decisions. Getting all of that correct, in our experience, significantly increases the attractiveness of an investment decision. And we pay particular attention to this as we work with you on different programs. Now, a little polling question again, Sonia. We kind of want to understand where the team is at this point. So within your organization, what would you say is the current stage of research and development for your lead asset? Sonia?
Okay, I'm now launching it, and everyone should see that blue screen take over once again. So remember, your involvement is very much appreciated. So please go ahead and cast your vote. So your options you have before you are lead not identified, optimization ongoing but no candidate, optimization in process, candidate identified, or is an enabling preclinical studies ongoing, or is an enabling studies completed, like lead asset in clinical development. So please go ahead and cast your vote. And then we will close the polls and get right back to Michael and his great presentation. Okay, Michael, that looks like it's the majority of our audience. So, okay, a few more seconds for a few more people here. Okay, that looks like it's it. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for participating in poll question number 2. Now let's take a look at the results. Okay, so here are the results, Michael. We got 14% of our audience that said lead not identified, then another 14% for optimization in process, then 14% again for candidate identified, but then we have 21% for an enabling preclinical studies ongoing. And what about this? 36% of our audience said enabling studies completed. So, Michael, what are your thoughts on that? I'm just
Uh,
curious.
well, fantastic. This basically shows the heterogeneity that exists in
Hmm.
the R&D space. All of those points of view are key, and
Yeah.
each of them, in my experience, requires a different motif, a different set of data, and a different emphasis. So very nice. Thank you so much, Sonia, for that poll question. The enabling IND group is really attractive to a clinical research organization such as ourselves because it would help us translate from what you've looked at non-clinically into what those first few clinical studies need to illustrate. As we all know, the various divisions of the FDA, EMA, MHRA put a great deal of emphasis on the enabling non-clinical data before any clinical research takes place. And having the data in hand that we can jointly evaluate and look at is really important to us all. Now, we encounter a lot of folks that have like, our interest is an indication A, B, C, and D, because the pharmacology of this particular asset suggests a lot of different shots on goal. What we've been recommending in this case is what I would call a portfolio evaluation. You've got an asset, it's got interesting biology, interesting pharmacology, actually a number of indications given that mechanism of action. Well, which one would you choose? Well, maybe it's the regulatory environment that is a major decision place here, or the competitive landscape, or the available, I call it the runway. I often tell the team, it doesn't help us, a company, if we design a study that takes 5 years to complete and there's 2 years of funding, or payer perspectives. If you have a stratagem that suggests, I want to exit to commercialization, is it going to be the case that you need to develop a certain dossier of information in order to influence policy and ultimate decisions? Now, we've done this many, many times. As in everything else, there are both attributes and limitations. The attributes are we're moving well beyond rationale. Rationale we could all come up with. But in our experience in this particular exercise, it's rarely discriminating. It does acknowledge multiple diverse points of view, lots of different points of view about what we should go after, Mike. Our biggest benefit is it informs the target selection and therefore the outsourcing strategy and also the investment strategy that you might consider. It's an informed, multiple stakeholder, comprehensive review looking at the asset from many different points of view that will hopefully facilitate the decision to move forward. Now, we also encounter limitations. So one of the most interesting one is we were certain, now we're very uncertain. We're uncertainty where once there was clarity. We actually had that experience recently in oncology. Some stakeholders will differentially weigh the parameters I'm going to show you. They'll put more oomph on whether or not there's a regulatory strategy or more emphasis on whether or not there's a non-competitive clinical environment. That's understandable, and that can change the evaluation that takes place. And all of us that have done this for many years will recognize this common sentiment. Is this an IP simply looking for an indication? So benefits and liabilities, but we do an awful lot of this, and we find it clarifies the situation for a small company, and it enables a consistent, compelling narrative as to what this interesting pharmacology might ultimately produce clinically. What are some of the questions we get into, just to show you? Now, we can change the areas here periodically, and we do. So rationale, everyone leads in their pitch deck with a rationale, and that's understandable. That's the big asset. So we ask the question, does that mechanism of action have a key role in disease, etiology, or progression? It's a key issue. It's a must-have. We must have a rationale that's reasonably compelling. Are there product-specific experimental models? Maybe yes, maybe no, and even if they exist, maybe they don't translate to the clinic. We can run them, Mike, but they don't really translate. Therefore, we don't have them. We actually have a few companies with that situation. They have a wonderful rationale. They have no non-clinical data quite specific to the indication that they're most interested in. Trial designs. Precedent studies, we all like novelty. Novelty is fun, but it's much easier to present a well-recognized experimental design where there are no arguments on the design. Instead, there's a focus on the results. Can we design something that maximizes signal in a very efficient way that reduces the expenditures associated with the trial, particularly for proof of concept? Regulatory pathway. This is really interesting. Lots of special pathways nowadays. Can we exploit that to accentuate the value proposition for the company? Regulatory guidance or intelligence, is it consistent? Interestingly, not always the case. So that's why parallel scientific advice meetings exist. Not always is it the case. There's this unanimity in terms of how a program might proceed. Clinical development environment, significant competition or not, how many patients per site per month? Or importantly, for a small company, in our experience, can we create opportunities for an inflection? I call it an inflection development strategy. Can we consciously and preemptively look at a program and say, let's put in some inflection points here where there's some announcement, some disclosable result. There's an ASH meeting coming up next week. Can we say something interesting? Is there an inflection point possible in the program? And then finally, adoption and access. I put this in the category, if you build it, would anybody come? So depending on who you speak to, this will be a really major point of review. And what we ask here with some colleagues is, can we get our arms around direct and indirect cost drivers here? Can we build this into the program that we're helping you design, such that you can create, again, a narrative, a value proposition while we're moving toward product approval in an NDA or MAA. Or it's not always negative, by the way. Occasionally, when we've done this, we actually see opportunities for enhanced differential reimbursement. Not simply they'll cover it, but they'll do it in a differential way given the attributes of the product. So that's one way of looking at it. That's a portfolio review. And you get something like this. So this is a graphical depiction of how this might work out. This is an example actually in oncology. We thought the trial designs and regulatory pathway were spectacular, best it's ever been. However, there were no disease-related biomarkers that we can get our arms around easily, so we couldn't dose range on it. And the clinical development environment was just really prohibitive. It gives you a sense in a composite way of valuing the asset in terms of its overall strategic impact. Rationale for sure, but there are lots of other variables here which would dictate a decision to invest in the company. And we try to accomplish that through something like this. Or we get these two as well. Wait a minute, Mike, just a second. We have a very specific target. We want to introduce precision in development. There's one indication and not more than one. So what we would like you to do here is a very systematic review across all of those domains you just spoke to. We'd like you to create a schematic of every potential study, not just the studies that are specific to the indication. As we all know, there are other studies that may or may not be needed. And importantly, we want to know the key metrics and the ballpark costing associated with that. Very precise, very different than the portfolio. Now, the attributes here are great. You are in development. This is not discovery in development. This is a development. It is a living business document. You position this, in our experience, to various venture teams as an example. They love it. They see exactly where you need to be, when you need to be there, how much money is involved to get to that point in time. It strongly, in our opinion, facilitates an investment decision because it helps the good colleagues that make these very hard decisions to mitigate the risk of the investment. And again, it's amenable to an inflection point identification. We're constantly looking for that. Where can we put something in that might position the asset and the company most favorably? Now, like everything else, it has limitations. So these are built upon a foundation of unconfirmed assumptions. Commonly, we will do this very early, like you're in IND enabling research, or maybe not into phase one or just into phase one. We'll start doing it there. We're going to be making a lot of assumptions about the target product profile, which, maybe they're not confirmed, maybe they are. And so what happens is it gets revised as frequently as the data are generated, which of course is what it's supposed to do. As the data are accrued, you change and modify the clinical development plan. And the more innovative your program, this is particularly relevant to some of the orphan diseases we work on. Understandably, the more innovative the program, the more uncertain are all those metrics. How much money, how long it takes, how many studies you need, and so on. Yet the results can be very gratifying, and we produce very big documents on this. And I'm going to show you one graph particularly. You get the idea of this. So what you're looking at, this is just an example of a series of studies leading to NDA. It's specific to this one specific asset. You'll notice a few things. There are lots of studies. Every study has a bar with it that indicates how long it takes, in our opinion, to execute that study. You'll notice there's a little hatch in front of each of the bars. Only a CRO would think about how long does it take for me to start that up and how long does it take for me to shut it down. So you can kind of see it's an overlapping tiered approach. Here's that inflection point. This particular one had an end of phase 2 meeting built in, but there are many others we could. In this one example, you notice what we did collectively with the sponsor is we put all of these other important studies toward the end of the development program for very simple reasons. Mike, I don't even know I have an asset here. I'd like to defer this investment as much as possible. The non-clinical data allows me to do that reasonably well. We want to know, do we have something that makes sense before we start investing in this particular program here? Now, the exception in this case, and this was really a difficult one, you notice here, I put in this thorough QTC study here. Now that's a $2.5 million 18-month investment. Not done casually, but done because in this particular circumstance, we thought it might be needed, and of course the sponsor agreed. So an example of how a tiered, layered approach, very quantitative. Every one of these studies has a timeline, has an estimated expenditure to it. You could fund off these studies, off these different inflection points. Very nice. Now, I mentioned getting access as well as approval. Well, we got to get the access. So this is a different group of people. So part of our background in our organization was I was president of one of the divisions of United Health Group. And I thought I understood healthcare until I worked in that company. And it was fabulously interesting. How they view our data is not the way we might discuss things in an R&D setting. So the question is, what could a CRO do to facilitate positioning your data in a favorable way? Well, one thing is put the studies where it has the most oomph. Very hard to do, by the way. CROs want to execute as rapidly as possible, as efficiently as possible, and that's understandable. But a payer, particularly a commercial plan, might want you to put that in an integrated delivery network or an accountable care organization so that we could utilize the microenvironment for study execution. I wrote an article one time. I love your models. Your models are really interesting. But what I really want to see are my data, the data in Kaiser Permanente, Geisinger, and so on, in my system. What would your particular asset do? And by placing at least a few sites in these particular type of kind of networks, we get insights that ordinarily would not be accrued. Or piggybacking, I call it piggybacking. It's not a regulatory mandated readout, but it's a readout that would resonate with these particular players. Who's your insurance company? Is your spouse working? Because maybe your condition influences his or her ability to attend to their task at work. Lots of data to suggest, consistent with the disability of the illness, that healthcare utilization increases in the caregivers of patients that have these horrible disorders, and the caregivers are enrolled in insurance plans. You can see how this might go. Publication strategy, one of the biggest complaints we had in the day, what very, very novel, clever technology would come for review, there'd be no publications that would resonate with a commercial plan's point of view. Might be publications, but the publications are designed for the doctors. They're designed for the healthcare provider. Useful, of course. What we want to say is, can we illustrate the potential value of it before approval by doing certain things, by positioning the data in certain ways, by describing the nature of the asset and how it might reduce healthcare utilization in terms of both direct and indirect costs. Occasionally, we'll get involved with what I call a parallel study to inform a direct or indirect cost estimate. I mean, every clinical program, as an example, has a lot of screen failure patients. They're close, but not exactly the patients you need in your particular program. Is it not possible, doable, is it not interesting to enroll those individuals in a parallel observational study? They're not in your product, they don't qualify, but they're close to your product. They're close to the population that you'll ultimately be treating. Could we not do that and derive a number of different outcomes, not measures, that would be important to Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and so forth? And on a rare occasion, we've actually done a direct-to-patient contact center. A lovely idea, many different regulatory and ethics committee issues that need to be attended to, but the ability to reach out to a family and ask them about key things which are important that will dictate whether or not that approved asset is actually accessible to them once it's on the market is a really nice thing to consider. So here's another poll question, Sonia, if we could. So is your technology best described as a platform, an asset or a series with mechanisms of action suggesting therapeutic potential across multiple therapeutic areas, or is it something different? Sonia, if you would, please.
Certainly, Michael, and I've just launched our final poll question. So the options that you have in front of you are yes, the mechanisms of action is such that one can envision applications in different therapeutic areas and a portfolio review could be informative. Or is it no, the mechanism of action is such that it is not likely the applications are plausible across therapeutic areas. Although multiple indications within a given therapeutic area can be considered, a clinical development plan for one indication is an optimal business statement. Okay, and then we have the last one being uncertain. So please go ahead. Sorry, that was strategy, Jim, and the last one is uncertain. So please go ahead and cast your vote right now, and then we'll get right back to Michael. Okay, a few more seconds here. I see there's a few more people there just trying to make their decision. Just click on any of the below there. This option is just a single option. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in all our poll questions and, of course, this final poll question. I'm now going to close the polls and let's take a look at the results. Okay, so here are the results, Michael. In our audience, 58% said yes, while 25% said no, and then we had 17% that said uncertain. So thank you, everyone, for participating in all our poll questions. Now back to you, Michael, and your thoughts on the results.
Well, very nice. Actually, I'm not surprised. If,
Mm.
if I had to give a overall sense of what we're seeing across the industry, the the assets that are being developed have multiple possible indications. You can see it in the pharmacology, and when we dig into the pharmacology with you, we can see the possibilities are much greater than any one indication, which of course gives a tremendous opportunity in terms of business development. How
Mhm.
can we position that in a way that would enhance an investor's interest in making that initial contribution and facilitating that development? Very nice. Thank you, Sonia. Now, let's talk about I call this the elephant in the room. This is where this all goes. So we need to manage the burn rates. And so the question is, what contracting model is best? When I was managing discovery in a biotech company, the CEO would say, it's $300 for each transgenic mouse you use. Can you give me a common control group so we don't have to spend so much money? That's the level of detail that can come about in these situations. And when we go to the clinic, well, that really consumes the resources. So I've come to appreciate this particular issue a great deal. Flexibility and innovation in how contracting models can be created. We've gone to the agencies, AMA, FDA, we've created an interesting program. How do we pay for it? How do we stretch that last dollar that would make a difference to your company? And so lots of different ways this could be done. And this is contingent on the level of commercial engagement that actually might exist. So if we have a strategic alignment, it would enable our teams to look at cash flow timings across all of the relationships with kind of agreed upon payment models. I am told, and I can see this is true, that a unit-based commercial arrangement permits fine calibration of required services by any CRO and accommodates the very changing dynamics of a clinical program. Early phase research, where most of us are going to be, it's about learning, not about confirming. It's about being quick on your feet and innovative and preemptive. So the ability to fine tune what the contracting needs to look like, I think is a real attribute. A fixed price model, which is fine, I guess, if we're in a prototypical phase 3 program, is great, but it imposes a rigid economic template upon an early phase clinical program, which of necessity must be resilient and dynamic. So the bottom line here is the realities of clinical research, particularly in early phase research, don't easily accommodate an inflexible one size fits every company model. And the business relationship between a sponsor and a CRO should mirror that reality. So in our interactions with many different small companies, we put a great deal of emphasis on this. Not initially, of course, because it's early, but by the time we're talking, can you run the study? We're into issues such this, and having this capability is a real asset, again, to help fine tune the burn rate that all of our companies seem to have. Now, the last slide I have for you, and I hope we have enough time, Sonia, for a few questions. Um, we have challenges and opportunities in my experience. I've done this 35 years and never been more interesting. But the reality is there's lots of new drug targets and they're very complex clinical trials. Tufts University this last year at the Chief Medical Officers Congress in Boston illustrated what's going on in some of these protocols. One primary, a couple of secondaries, and 2 pages of exploratory assessments. So new drug targets, very complex clinical trials, because we're trying to gather data that would resonate with a diverse set of stakeholders here to inform subsequent investment decisions. So it means, by definition, an informed and strategic outsourcing model, in our opinion, is key. So some of the suggestions we've had over the years of doing this, and this has really worked well for us, and it's just a pleasure to do it, is embed the CRO within the team. Make them a part of your team. They're going to be listening a lot. The earlier you are in R&D, the more they're going to be listening and maybe occasionally ask a good question. They'd be a good colleague. The later you get toward that clinical development program, the more contributory they should be, but they're a part of your team. This is the model that works well, in our opinion. The CRO absolutely has to assure, whatever they do, that there's infrastructure, processes, and systems in place. There's enough risk in clinical research that not having that in place is a real disincentive to investment. Mike, I own the risk of the product. It goes with what I do, but I cannot risk that the CRO will not execute to the plan that they gave me. They gave me the plan. So executing to that with good quality, good data integrity, sophisticated analyses, that's the key. We need to understand the science. You spent a lot of time getting there. A lot of talent went into that. We need to be appreciative of the science. We need to be at least capable of asking the right questions of you so that it informs the clinical program in a way that makes sense. You need to also understand my business. I am struggling to move this asset along. It's hard enough to raise funds in today's market. I need you to be efficient and sensitive to that consideration. Now, but some of the indications we work on, like I always say, it isn't common that we have the 20th SSRI in depression. Everyone has interesting technology, highly nuanced patient targets, and the regulatory climate evolves along with that. We've seen a great deal of that these last couple of years. So the ability to anticipate the evolving regulatory climate, to maximize opportunities given that evolution, is a real key differentiator, I think. Now, real-time responsiveness is everything. If we want to be a part of the team, then you got to be accessible. Pick up the phone and call type on target available opportunity is what's needed here. No meter running in the background. This is an engagement, it's a commitment, it's not calibrated. It's part of your team. Contracting flexibility. I really love this part of our company, the ability to map the burn rates and the spend rates to what your realities are in terms of your financing. And of course, attention to cultural fit and team chemistry. There've been a lot of research in that regard. You know, the best teams are those that work together seamlessly, that are respectful and appreciative of everyone's different discipline. And then overall, given today's discussion, it's the ability to assure quality metrics. I have to have that. But I also need you as a CRO to give me some value added activities. Kind of what else do you have? So, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the call today. We're going to have some opportunities for questions. Sonia, please do ask, and I'll do my best to attend to them. Sonia? Mhm, mhm.
Well, thank you very much, firstly, for such a passionate presentation with a lot of detail. I'm sure everyone appreciated it. I know I did. And I just want to encourage our audience members now that you still have the opportunity right now to send in your questions by using that questions window, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the time that we have together. So while you were speaking, Michael, I did receive a bunch of questions. So let me start with this first one here. This audience member is asking, what is the best time for engagement when a company is in discovery research? That's a good question.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. As I
Mm,
mentioned previously, if it's too early, we would just be interested colleagues. If it's too late, we can't actually facilitate much. The
mm,
best time is when a company is in IND enabling research. You have a lead, you've optimized the candidate, you've optimized it, you have a lead, you're
mhm.
starting IND enabling research. Our experience is that's at least an 18-month to 2-year journey, and
Oh,
being a part of that is going to help us help you. So I
mm,
would I would say that's the answer there, Sonia. That's the best time. But any time is good. But that's the
mm.
best in terms of facilitating investment decisions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Michael, for sharing that. We'll jump to the next question. This audience member is asking, does Worldwide Clinical Trials, WCT, have a dedicated investment consulting team?
No, we do not. So, but the way we would work is we
Mhm,
would work with your investment groups. We would represent not the attributes of the product. Of course, that would be inappropriate, and you would be
mhm,
presenting that. But we would represent a theme that says we can de-risk that program. We can anticipate the regulatory and development climate, excuse me. We can create very informed programs that with multiple inflection points that are
mhm,
predictable and allow you to
mhm.
calibrate the nature of your investment.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Next question here. Does worldwide clinical trials facilitate contact with investors? VC/PE is what they have here in brackets.
I have done that. It can
Hmm.
occur. You have quite a large group of friends in the business, and occasionally we'll see something that's quite exciting. And what we do in that situation is we will make a recommendation that there might be some interest in the asset, and with their permission, reach out to these other individuals and see if there's any traction. The engagement, of course, is between the sponsor and the investor, but we
Okay.
would be there to actually help represent the clinical program. For some of our opportunities, you know, when you have a really great pre-IND meeting, you know, it's like having the golden ticket in the Willy Wonka chocolate bar. You'll be asked to go down. I mean, you know, you have a meeting on Tuesday, you're in New York on Wednesday, talking to an investment team about the wonderful meeting you just had and how it really facilitates a move ahead strategy. Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right. And the next question that we have is how integrated can the WCT consulting process become? For example, attend regulatory teleconferences and meetings or participate in planning sessions with non-clinical scientists?
Yes, that's exactly what the thesis is here. Make
Okay.
us part of the extended team. We don't offer preclinical services, but we love to hear about the data that's going to inform the clinical trial. We have very, very frequently assisted sponsors in direct regulatory interface, in
Mhm,
person, in video conference, all the permutations therein,
mhm,
to help facilitate closure on key points. In today's environment, like they say, it takes a village, and it absolutely takes a village. And
Mhm.
we bring our particular expertise and orientation to the table, and hopefully that would facilitate kind of closure on key milestones.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you. This looks like it's our final question. So, audience members, if you'd like to still continue to send in your questions, you can go ahead and do so now. If not, this will be our final question. And this audience member is asking, what attributes besides MOA novelty are most attractive to investors in the experience of worldwide clinical trials?
Management.
Management. Okay.
I would say and I say it quite candidly, I am frequently on the phone with
Mhm,
many companies, and I during the call, I'm saying, "That is a fabulous CEO." That CEO is not into the science, and maybe they shouldn't be. They're into it enough they can be conversational.
mhm,
But I can tell they've got it in terms of organizing the business, facilitating the outreach, bringing in the colleagues that can help them advance the asset along. I would say it's the management team is the most attractive asset that any of our companies might have. It's the management more than the product in some respects that
mhm.
determines the eventual success of a company, at least in my experience.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Well, thank you very much for sending in all those questions. We have reached the end of the Q&A portion of the webinar. And if you're interested in hearing more from worldwide clinical trials, you can register for the next webinar, See How It's Done, case studies on patient experience design, scheduled for Wednesday, December the 6th, 2023. And I'm going to put the link in the box here for everyone to check out. So make it convenient for you. There you go. And remember, if we could not attend to all your questions, the team at Worldwide Clinical Trials will follow up with you after this presentation. And if you have any further questions or inquiries, please reach out to the marketing team here, marketing@worldwide.com, for further information or resources. So thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to this recorded archive. A survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is appreciated as it will help us to improve on our further webinars. Additionally, there is a link to view the recording of this event, which you can also share with your colleagues so they may register for the recording here as well. So I encourage you to do that. And there's even more. Get even more out of today's presentation by downloading the supporting materials that we have available for you under the Handouts tab. And there's two: Facilitating Investment Decisions for Small to Mid-sized Pharmaceutical and Biotechnology Companies. And the second handout is Clinical Drug Development at the Crossroads, One Drug, Multiple Indications. So please go ahead and check that out. Now, it's my pleasure to thank our speaker, Michael, for that very insightful presentation and for answering all your questions. It was a pure delight to be here with you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope you found this webinar informative. It has been my pleasure to be your webinar moderator. On behalf of the team here at X Talks, we thank you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Sonia Hunt. Bye for now. Please take care. Bye. Bye, Michael. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you. Mhm.